Welcome one and all. So the talk tonight, I've sort of split it in half. One of the first bits about understanding what Farming Forecaster is telling you, and the back half is how do you interpret that data for decision making. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and I've said to Steph that I'm happy for her to interrupt me to tackle questions as we go along. Okay, so we try and keep this as informal as we possibly can, even though it's a webinar, and those of you who know me well, I'm not a great one for formality. So let's get going. As always, it was working brilliantly. Here we go. I think important thing to realise about your farm and Farming Forecaster, there are some differences. So your farm's on the left. You have paddocks. They've got different pastures in them. They've got different stocking rates. You have a matrix on your farms. The overall stocking rate in your farm might be 10.5 DSC. When we set up a farm system in Farming Forecaster, we'll set it up at a stocking rate of 10.5 DSC per hectare. But we haven't got a whole lot of paddocks. Can that be done? Yes, it can be. As soon as you take grass grow and automate it and have it developing data on 180 sites, which it's doing at present, you lose some functionality of the program. So what Farming Forecaster gives you is an average herbage mass for the farm. And this is creating some problems because it is very difficult for a producer with the left-hand side to work out what's your herbage mass across all your paddocks. Now, we use the same calving times, lambing times, sell-off dates, weights, similar pastures. You have a variety of soils on your place. We just use a typical soil for the area. You get a variety of rainfall across your property. We grab weather data from the BOM produces these 5 kilometre square grids for all of Australia. That's where we grab our weather data for. So the rainfall that will be in the grid will not be exactly the same as the rainfall you can get. Now, that's just one of the things we have to accept. Why do we use the BOM 5K square grid? Because we need 30 years of weather data. And the only place we're going to get 30 years of weather data, historical, is from BOM. So bear in mind, Farming Forecaster is giving you an average across the farm. Now I'm just going to flick round because the people on tonight come from a range of geographical regions. So that what you're looking at present is the Monero. So you'll see there in the drop-down box, I'm highlighting all soil layers. You can look at individual layers. You can look at a whole lot of rainfall data. What happened today? What happened yesterday? Last 7 days. If there's a rainfall event come through, I come to this site because within 5 minutes, I get a picture of what rainfall's happened across a very large geographical area. I've never been able to do that before as quickly as I can now. What are the numbers in the circles? It's saying this is to the best of our knowledge, the amount of plant available water that's present in the top 60 centimetres now. So some sites are sitting up in the 88, 87, 82, 76. Then we've got some at 38, some at 40. So even across the Monero, you can see the variation. There's 2 square boxes there. What's a square box? It hasn't got a probe. That's a decision made. The most expensive part in setting this up is putting the probe in the ground. You can have sites which are what we call virtual sites. So you get the pasture forecasting side, but you don't get the probe information. So that's what the Monero looks like. This is one of the sites from the Monero. Because this site has a probe, on the left-hand side of the screen is the probe information at the sensor levels that are on this probe, 10, 20, 40, 60. So what do we see? 40 centimetres and above, there's more than half available plant moisture, but at 60 centimetres, it's dry. Interestingly, if you look at those little arrows to the right-hand side of that, they're carrying 16% moisture this year than they were at the same time last year. On the right-hand side is the pasture forecast. So I'm going to go into all these in more detail. So I'm just giving you an overview because at present, different regions are looking differently. This is now the Riverina LLS, except for one site. Phil got excited. Except for one site up here. That's the only one with a probe in the ground. Now, the Riverina is in the process of putting probes in the ground, and hopefully that'll be done shortly. So all we've got here is model sites, but the model has a water balance within it. And I clicked on the rock site. That's why. So the rock data was updated 2 days ago. I downloaded all these slides yesterday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. So the 2 days means it's up to date to the 16th of August, 2024. The moisture data here, when you look at the model, is presented differently. First of all, it's actually telling us the millimetres of plant available water, PAW, plant available water. There's 27 mils. The box plot's telling us how the moisture has been for the same days. So this applies to the red dot is where it is in 24, that red dot there. That's the average of the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th of August, 2024. The box plot is those same dates, 14th, 15th, 16th of August, but from 1994 through to 2023, 30 years of data. And you will hear me repeat that 30-year block quite frequently in this talk. So that's the amount of water we've got now. Historically, we're dry. We're at about the 25% level. It's been drier. That's the median. So you click on any of these boxes and you'll get a similar thing. Now we'll just flick to the Auburn Creek one. It's holding 65 mils. That's a lot of water in the soil, but it's red. Normally that site, because of where it sits and its rainfall, you'd expect it to be holding a lot more moisture. So there's good moisture in the soil, but it's dry compared to historical values. And Steph and I were having a chat earlier on King Island and up on the northwest coast of Tassie at present, we've got the same thing occurring. Normally, those people would be waterlogged now, and they're not waterlogged, so they think things are terrible. They're not as bad as they think because being waterlogged doesn't give you any advantage, creates problems. So the beauty about this is it's giving you an indicator of plant available water and you're not being conned by the waterlog side of things. So if we look at the rock, because there's no probe in the ground, there's absolutely no information on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, as I said, they are in the process of putting probes in the ground, so that will change. I can't tell you when. We've got the same model side because on this side, we just build the farm system based on what producers tell us, and we use the BOM weather data, and we can get a grid anywhere in Australia.
Phil, Sandy has just asked, is the Auburn Valley site a virtual site?
Yes, they're all squares, they're all virtual sites. Right? Again, give us 4 or 5 months down the track and there'll be a probe in the ground, so it'll change. But at present, everything in the Riverina is a virtual site. Come on, go to my next slide. Now here's one in the Murray LLS. So right up in this top right-hand corner, region Murray, there's a button next to it, full change. You can go into any region. If you want to click on it and go and look at Riverina, you hit change, select Riverina, go and look at Riverina. You want to go to southeast, click change, go to the southeast. You want to go to Tasmania, hit change, go to Tasmania. You want to go to Western Australia, click change, go to Western Australia. Right, so we're in the Murray now. Now, you'll notice on the probe, all we've got is 30 centimetres, 100%. This is a probe that was put in the ground, I would be guessing, close to 10 years ago. An old probe, some of the sensors lower aren't working, so unfortunately all we get is the 30 centimetre. Why 30 centimetres? The probe was put in 20 centimetres below the ground so people could crop over the top. So the first sensor is 10 centimetres from the top, So all we get is data at 30 centimetres. I don't think that's a great idea, to be honest, and I've always argued against it because it tells us we've put a probe in the ground, but it tells us nothing about the moisture above. I think on mixed farms, we can find an area of the farm which isn't going to be cropped, so we put a probe in as it's done properly, so we get readings from 10 centimetres down. That'll be the end of the sermon for the night. Someone might want to mute it. There's a lot of background coming through. Again, so that's and in other Murray sites, the probes give different readings. Again, there are 8 new sites, probe sites in the ground, farm systems developed for Murray, and I was hoping that they would have been live by tonight. They're not. I don't understand, but I would expect within certainly the next fortnight, maybe the next week, those 8 new sites across the Murray LLS will come on live. Now, they'll range from Tumbarumba out to the pastoral zone. Right, let's keep going. Now, there are a few important things we need to look at. Top right-hand corner in red, learn to use Farming Forecaster. All I can give you tonight is a very quick snapshot. In there are 7 or 8 YouTubes. If you looked at the whole lot of them, it would take 1 hour. You could take them in chunks. It goes through the whole site and explains everything. The one thing I've learned with working with producers with this over 5 years now is the producers who put a bit of time understanding what the information is, how to interpret, are the ones who are using it to make the biggest decisions. Unless you're prepared to invest some time to bring your knowledge up to the critical level, you're not getting the benefit out of the program. So I can do my best, but you've also got to put some time in as well. The other 3 critical buttons are these ones across the bottom here. View regional maps. So when I've go and use some of those maps, I click on that to get that regional map up. This is a summary of the probe, summary of the pasture forecast. There's more information about the probe, you click on that. There's more information about the pasture, you click on that. You'll have to excuse me for a minute, I just got a cough.
While you're on a break there, Phil, we've had a question come through from Craig. What weather data do you use to put into the model? Is it only rainfall?
Rainfall, maximum, minimum, solar radiation, humidity. There's 9 pieces of daily data that goes into the program. So it's pretty comprehensive. We can't get all the data we need from a probe. That's why we have to go back to BOM. Right down the bottom left-hand corner, there's a whole lot of weather information. Sort of similar to what you could find on BOM. Why is it there? In the early days when producers were strongly involved in setting this up, they said, we want all the information on one site so we don't have to go to 2. So if you go and look in that, you will see data you would also see in METI, but it's there on one site for your 5K square grid, or the 5K square grid that applies to the site we've looked at. Now let's look at the 2 green circles. Probe, last updated 5 hours ago. I downloaded that data at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So that means that probe information you're looking at there was current as of 11 a.m. Sunday, the whatever of August 2024. And the pasture forecast was updated 2 days ago. We'll talk about when it's updated. You always have to go and look at when the update was, because that provides relevance to what the data you're looking at. Sometimes there's a breakdown. Probe breakdown. Telstra might have a tower go out. There's a whole lot of reasons why things can drop out. You want to know that what you're looking at is current, or is it 2 days old, 4 days old, a month old? The only other 2 things we want to look at are these 2 purple things over here. That's a little I for information. If you look at this pasture growth rate figure, That makes no sense unless you click on that eye to see what days it applies for. I added up in an earlier screen, didn't talk about it, but this 27 kilos per day applied between the 10th and the 16th of August. I clicked on that. These are screenshots. I don't do anything live. On the web, you're just asking for trouble. It tells you. So if you're going to look at that, you've got to click on that. The two go together. We've got two buttons, which we'll talk about later on. This little eye figure explains what those two are, because by tomorrow you might have forgotten. Click on that. It'll refresh your memory. So there's some of the key buttons you need to, you will use a lot in this program. Now here, I've clicked on the more pasture, the more probe button, and what do we start seeing? So in the probe information above, it was percentage figure for 11 a.m. yesterday at the different levels. Now we're looking at a graph for the last 12 months. That's going from the 18th of August 2023 to the 18th of August 2024. So you can see how moisture has changed during the year. You also have the option of comparing that to other years, and all I've done is clicking that, I just pulled up the previous year. So what have we got below? We've got 18th of August 2022, the 18th of August 2023. So we're actually carrying, at this site, we're carrying more moisture in the soil this year in the 10, 20 and 40 than we were last year. We carried more moisture at 60 centimetres last year than we are this year. This site got January rain, didn't get it the year before, had a lousy spring, had a good spring the year before. I'm finding producers find this very powerful in helping them think about, you've got an idea of what you were doing last year. Well, you can see where was moisture last year compared to where it is this year. I keep going, and I'm not showing you all, I'm just taking snapshots. The one I've gone to is soil temperature. A lot of people get very excited about soil temperature. To be honest, I think that excitement is overblown, but so be it. So the top is the last 12 months of soil temperature, and all I've done is highlighted the red, which is the sensor at 10 centimetres, and the blue is the sensor at 60. Typical pattern in summer, the soil's cooler at 60 centimetres than it is at 10. In winter, the soil's warmer at 60 centimetres than it is at 10. And down below, I'm comparing it with 3 years ago. So this is back to 20 and 21. So if we look at the current situation, the soils in August 21 were colder than what they are this year. You know, if you look at what's happened to soil temperature this site over the last certainly week, there's been a big increase in soil temperature.
Bill, we've had another question from Christine. Do the probe history graphs have measurements down the side so we can calculate how much there is each year?
If you put your cursor over the graph at any point, it will give you the percentage figures. So what we are not expressing on that graph, millimetres of water, because it costs about $3,500 per site to do the work. We just didn't have the money. What we're doing is expressing percentage of available moisture. Where's the wet point? Where's the driest point? Where are we sitting in relation to that amount? That's what that percentage is telling us. Quite frankly, it's good enough for what we use. So on that graph, you put at any point, it'll tell you the percentage figures for the various levels. So it is there. I just I didn't highlight that when I did the screenshot. This is a moisture probe, one of the new Murray ones that have gone in, which Sandy might find exciting. It's at south of Tumbarumba, 642 metres above. This probe's only been in the ground about 4 months. And when a probe's only been in the ground 4 months, you can collect a lot of data and it doesn't swamp you. One of the problems we're having with this site now is we're collecting a massive amount of data for a lot of sites, and we have to start becoming selective of what we keep. So on the farming forecaster site, we're only collecting one soil temperature figure a day at 10 a.m. in the morning to give a representative change. At present, the data gets transferred every 15 minutes. So we can see this in the early stages. A year down the track, we won't be able to see this, but I think it highlights a few points. So this is July this year, 17th of July through to the end of July. That weekend was most likely the most miserable day we've had this winter, and in Yass, it was the most miserable day we've had in about 4 years. So from a human point of view, that day was an absolute terror. Cold, wet, windy. Therefore, as humans, we are affected by wind chill. Look what happened to soil temperature on that day. Hardly budged. We reckon it was a lousy day from a soil point of view. It didn't agree. We come over here. This was the first really big frost. That line is midnight. So it reaches its lowest in the morning, and then it was a beautiful, clear, sunny day, and we had an improvement of 5 degrees during the day. What causes this increase in soil temperature? It is sunlight, energy from the sun. This is at 10 centimetres. If we had a sensor at 5 centimetres, the coldest point would have been lower and the warmest point would have been higher. If we had a sensor at 1 centimetre, it would have been at 0 or minus, and at 1 centimetre, it might have got up to 14 degrees. So people talk about the soil temperature. There is no soil temperature. The temperature through the soil is varying at all different levels. We've got roots at 10, at 20, at 30, at 40, at 50, at 60. And at each of those levels, the plant roots are experiencing different soil temperatures. Right? There is no such thing as a soil temperature. What this tells us is if we get a big increase in soil temperature, it's telling us we're getting a lot of solar radiation coming in. What drives photosynthesis? Solar radiation. So you can use this as a guide for what might be happening with growth. And some of the producers in Tassie now, soil temperatures recorded every day. The pasture growth rate's only recorded every 7 days. They're looking at the changes in soil temperature. And if soil temperature's going up, it's giving them an indication their pasture growth rates are going to go up. Now I've clicked on the more pasture information. So model data using GrassGrow. GrassGrow was first released in the late 90s. I've used it with producer groups for the last 25 years. Does it work? Of course it works. Does it work all over Australia? No, it doesn't. Does it have to be used with common sense? Of course it does. Is any model perfect? No, they're not. But this will tell us more about our pasture systems than we're ever going to dream up out of our heads. It's most likely had more impact on the development as me as a professional officer than anything else I've been involved with. So here's some information about what enterprise has been modelled. On this side, it's prime lambs. There's the lamb and weaning date. What happens with the progeny? What's the stocking rate it's run out? What are the pasture types? What's soil, fertility, etc. And again, the white box is the 5 kilometre square grid that we can, so we know the probe's there, we know its latitude and longitude, we put that into Silo, which is a computer site in Queensland, and I pull up the grid that the probe sits in, and I download a weather file for that 5K grid. And I will download the weather file from the 1st of January 1980 through to the current date. We only use the weather data from 1994. So we run the program for 14 years to settle down before we start using data. So if you're going to any site, and I should say this is of as much relevance to a producer who hasn't got a site than a producer who has got a site. Some people think, oh, if I haven't got a site, this is no good to me. Sorry, rubbish. This has relevance for 85% of producers out there. There are few people at the extremes in terms of exceptionally high stocking rates and exceptionally conservative stocking rates where things will get wonky. But the vast bulk of producers, of course, from my experience, you all tend to put similar grazing pressures on your properties. Some people will grow less grass
We may have just lost Phil. Can you still hear us, Phil?
Walking through it.
Sorry,
What do you
Phil.
see? Yep.
That just lagged for a couple of minutes. Could you just repeat that last point you were making, please?
Holy do, Steph, you're expecting me to go backwards. That's fair enough. The critical thing of this is read the farm system that's been developed, because that's going to have some influence on what you're looking at, right? The other thing I said is this has relevance whether this is on your place or whether you're a neighbour 5k down the road. Don't think because there's no probe site near me, I can't look at it. You can have great confidence with it. If you go into that those YouTubes, I've got a 5 or 10 minute thing there looking at a range of different properties within the same region, and it just shows that you would make the same decision. The numbers might change, but the decision you would make on the information doesn't change. The critical thing with this is don't get hung up on numbers. It's the trends that drive our decisions. I hope that's covered it, Steph. What have we got now? The major thing that hits you when you look at that is you've got 3 shaded colours. And the red box over to the right, what's the green covering? It's covering, this is the last 30 years of green herbage mass for this period, for this farm. So in some years, where are we? We're here in August sometime. In some years, there's been herbage mass has been down here, and in some years it's been up there, and it's even some years it might have been up there. Where the brown meets the green is that mythical average line. Where the brown meets the red, it's the 25%. Where the white meets the 10, it's the 10%. Where the green meets the white, it's the 90%. Your third over here, red, 10 to 25, brown, 25 to 50, green, 50 to 90. Why do we give you the historical data? It gives you a reference point, which is absolutely fundamental. Now we've got a black line. The black line is what has happened in late July and August at this site in 2024. This is one of the great features of the update of this program. We never had this black tracking line before, and it's made a huge difference. Now what happens? Just to show you, I picked them. I forget. I think these were Monero sites. Doesn't matter where they are. It's the logic that I'm talking about. You can look at any site and apply the same logic. The last one was trending pretty well. This one started off above about average. Over 1 month, it's sitting down there, and if that same trend line continues during the latter half of August, they could start September in pretty dire scenarios. So in 1.5 months, there's been a rapid drop off. That's why this line has become so critical. The famous spaghetti graph, and there is some logic in here, believe it or not. Now, we've got dotted lines, red, brown, black, green. They are the historical values, the 30 years of historical values. So on the farming forecaster graph, between here and there is coloured red, between brown and black is coloured brown, and above black is coloured green. I've never worked out how you do that in Excel, so that's what you get from me. What's the critical point? This black line, this is in fact a run I did for the Holbrook district. That's what's happened to green feed from start of August through to the 18th of August. Right? Things have started picking up. You are in better position. At the 18th of August, that was the last time the program had measured daily data. Rainfall, max, min, solar radiation, blah, blah, blah. How do we generate the forecast? That point there is fixed. Then what we do is we tell the program to go and grab the daily weather data from in the actual one, 1994, and run it. So I've just picked out 6 years as randoms. I've picked out 1997. It's the green line. So if from the 19th of August through to the end of November, the daily weather that this site recorded in 1997 occurred, you just follow the green line. That's what would happen to green pasture mass. 2003. That's 2003. That is 2003. The year we all love, 206. Bingo, collapse, lost green by November. 2012's the purple. 2021, things just went on and on and on. And in 2023, peak dropped and fell away. Now, all I've done is generated 6 graphs. What the program generates is 30 graphs. It uses data from 1994 to 2023. So it's got, for every day in that period, it's got 30 data points. We can't put up 30 graphs. No one can make sense of it. So what do? We put up percentile graphs, lines, 10%, 25, 50, 75, 90. So how do we get the 10%? At each day, we have 30 data points of potential pasture, green pasture, and the 10% line, 10% of 30 is 3. We go up to the third and just join all the 3 values from the bottom. That gives you the 10% line. 25%, we go up a quarter, join all those. That's the 25%. 50, we join the middle ones, etc. So it all starts at a common point, 1st of August, based on what was the pasture at the end of July, what was the stored moisture at the end of July, what was the animal's weight, what was the animal's reproductive status. It restores about 50 data points. So you get this spread of potential pasture curves, which is driven by weather that you have experienced within this 5K grid before. And then every 7 days, the black line is drawn to show where it's actually tracking in this month. So that is the black line that's been drawn. That's what's happened in August 2024. So we started off at the point. The good news is you're now tracking towards the green line. You're not going down the red line, you're heading to the green line. On about the 22nd of August, that tracking line will go again. It'll go another 7 days. And you'll see, is it still sitting on the green line as it dropped back to the yellow line? This tracking line is drawn 3 times a month. Then you don't see the last 7 days. And then on the 1st of September, this is all redone based on what pasture mass is on the 31st of August, what soil moisture is there, all those factors. This process of generating a forecast for the next 4 months is done, and the next one will be September, October, November, December. Just out of interest, because we update it every month, I now don't place that much pressure. I don't look that much at the months a long way out, because I know I'm going to get a far better picture of November when a forecast is done in September than when it's done in August. The advantage of updating it every month, I think we could actually just do a forecast for 3 months.
We've got another question, Phil. Does it matter if your pasture type is quite different to the monitoring site?
No, and I'll come to that a bit later on of how you interpret it, but make sure that person who asked that question, make sure I've answered it for you before we finish, okay? If you're looking at the tracking line, I get rid of a lot of the other lines. So I've now just selected 2 lines. So it just tells me pretty clearly where the black's tracking rather than having the red and the blue and everything else. I know some people in Tassie just look at one line. They just pull up one line. They don't get all 5 lines up. You decide what you want to do. You control it. You either tick it, you either bring them in or get them out. I personally do what you're seeing here. I get rid of the lines that are irrelevant to me now, and I just keep an eye on what's going on. And you can change that every time. Now, we are looking at these two little boxes. Sorry?
Got a question.
Yep.
Where does pasture dry matter estimate come from?
It's modelled. The model, grass grows grass every day. It knows what rainfall it is, knows what the temperature is. It knows where the depth, where the roots are in the soil. It knows what the fertility is because we said all that. It knows what the stocking rate is. So this is a case of taking 30 or 40 years of pure research science and putting it into a model to give you something useful. That's what GrassGrow's done. It's converted. I could show you cases of scientific papers which we would never read. It's taken the work that's come out of those papers and it's put it into something which becomes useful to us. So the model works out, given the conditions, is grass going to grow, yes or no? Why mightn't it grow? There's no moisture or it's too cold. If it's going to grow, how quickly is it going to grow? How many animals are on it? What's their reproductive status? How much of that are they going to eat? It does that for a day and then it repeats the process the next day and it repeats the process the next day. It just goes every day, it grows grass and animals eat it and it just balances things as it goes through. As I said, I've been using this program for 25 years with producers. It works. Would it work in Western New South Wales? No. Would it work in Northern Queensland? No. Does it work in Holbrook? Too right. Does it work on the Monero? Too right. Does it work at Yes? Yes. Victoria? Yes. South Australia? Yes. Tasmania? Yes. I had a very large Tasmanian producer ring me up the other day, and he's not a bloke who's renowned for giving compliments, but he said, Phil, this thing is bloody accurate. So I wouldn't be sitting here giving you this talk. I wouldn't have wanted to get Farming Forecaster up and running if I didn't think this program worked. It works. Believe it. Now, there's two ways you can do the forecast. Climatology is what I just described to you, where you use the last 30 years of actual weather data. You look over this side, we've ticked the Access S box. Access S is the BOM program that generates their seasonal forecasts. So data from around the world comes into the Access program every single day. The European Union send weather data from Europe to Australia to go into the Access program. Why? Because it works better if we get the weather data out of the European Union and Japan and America and Canada and everywhere else in the world. First, the United Nations organization in the world was the World Meteorological Organization. Countries have always shared climate data. They might have had wars with each other, but they share climate data. So that all comes into the Access model, and every day the Access model generates 11 forecasts. What we do in Farming Forecaster is grab the 11 forecasts over the last 3 days of the month. So this forecast here was done on the 1st of August. So we grabbed the data from the last 3 days of July. So we grabbed 33 future forecasts. This is actual weather that's fallen. This is forecasts for that 5-kilometre grid. It's not a forecast for Australia. It's the forecast for that 5-kilometre grid. And we do exactly the same thing as we've done before. Right? So this is forecast. This is actual. How do I look at these two things? There are subtle changes between these two, but to me, they're not big enough changes for me they don't influence my thinking. I'm looking on this side, I'll look at this side first, the actual, and I come over here. Are there major changes, yes or no? And if there's not major changes, I drop it out of my thinking. There's a few things we need to be clear about. The seasonal forecast data you access on the BOM site is updated during the month because they generate 11 new runs every day. So look, I'm not 100% sure. I think the seasonal forecasts on BOM are updated 3 times a month. In Farming Forecaster, we just get data from the last 3 days of the month, and we don't get any update during the month. So if something radical happens during the month, if you want to be really on top of what the forecasts are, you would look at what BOM's saying, especially in the latter half of the month. So if I look at Farming Forecaster now with that August forecast, Access really wasn't saying much was going to happen in springtime. Whereas just of late, BOM are starting to say, oh, we think it's going to be a wetter spring. So it'll be interesting to see once September comes along, because then we'll use the last 3 days of forecast data from the end of August, see whether we're starting to see a trend out of Access of a bit more spring rain. So the BOM site will give you the most up-to-date information about seasonal forecast, because that's updated during the month. Farming Forecaster, it's not updated during the month. It's updated at the end. Again, I looked at these before, but if we keep going down under more pasture information, we get these graphs of where soil moisture is. And there's some interesting things to look at. So, this site's holding about 58 millimetres of water. It's nearly at average. This site, which I think was the Rock, is only holding 10 mils and is well down on it. But both of those are brown. Let's go to the next site. It's red. Look how much moisture it's holding. It's holding 77 millimetres of water, more water than the other 2 sites. But for this site, that is dry. Normally, that you would expect it to be a lot wetter. So they've got good moisture for growth, but it's not as wet as you would normally expect it. And Steph and I were talking earlier, I think that's some of the case of what's happening on King Island and Circular Head in Tassie at present. They'd normally expect to be really wet, almost waterlogged. And because they're not, they think their throat's cut. But actually, they've still got pretty good water, which will drive a fair bit of growth. So that's not only do you look at where the dot sits in relation to history, but you also look at how much millimetres of stored water is the soil holding.
Before you go on, Phil, a comment's just come through. So I'd be looking at that thinking we're in line for a short spring.
That one worries me for a short spring. We've got no stored water, so that spring is going to be very dependent on what rainfall occurs. This one, you've got a bit more of a buffer, so I'd feel more relaxed there. I'm feeling nervous there. I'm feeling relaxed. I'm feeling less relaxed. I'm feeling less nervous there, and I'm most likely not feeling nervous at all there. I know that might seem a bit funny, but it's the thing about this program. You have to spend a bit of time looking at it. You're not going to look at Farming Forecaster and in one go look at it and say, geez, I'm confident in that. You're going to have to look at it for 6 or 9 months. What's it telling me? What are the sites around telling me? What am I seeing on my place? I tend to find it takes 18 months for producers to get a feeling for it and gain confidence. And that's what the review of the Tassie project's involved. It's, people who have just come into the program are stating they haven't got confidence. People who have been in the program for 2.5 years are saying we're making very big decisions on this because we're confident. I can't give you confidence. The only way you're going to get confidence is spend a bit of time looking at sites around you, comparing it to what's happening on your place. That's the way you get confidence. As I said before, you've got to put some time into it. This again is another Tassie site, but I just want to show you the impact of what can happen, of what 1 month might do. So this was the forecast done on the 1st of July. So up until then, things had been very dry. This site did not one of their sensor readings was in double figures. So, the probe graph at the top, what percentage? Every one of their moisture readings was less than 10. They were single figures or they were 0. It was dry. There's the forecast. Then July down there was fantastic. I think this site got about 80 millimetres of rain. So that's reflected. There's now more. This is the forecast done on the 1st. So the forecast done on the 1st is working on the basis that the soil's bloody dry. The forecast done on the 1st of August is working on the basis there's some moisture in the soil. Have a look at the red lines. Have a look at the yellow lines. See the change? The data, and I've kept this time period the same. This finishes at November, this finishes at November. It's exactly the same rainfall that's been used. We've gone back and used, it's the same rainfall from the 1st of August to the end of November in both of these. That hasn't changed. Why has the red line gone up? Why has the yellow line gone up? Because we've got more moisture in the soil at the starting point. That moisture in the soil is a buffer, and therefore it means we end up getting better growth. Doesn't make much difference to the blue line, which is when you get an exceptionally wet year. It makes a big difference on the red line. So that's just an indication of why it's important that you look at it every month, because if rainfall's been kind to you during the month, it could radically change the forecast you might be given for the next period. Now, how do we start assessing your situation now? Always look at a number of sites around you. Even if there's a site on your place, just don't look at your site, look at the site around you. I'll always look at 4 or 5 sites. If you look at four sites that are around you and the trend line is all the same on those 4 sites, that's a confidence factor. It's like anything we look at has error bars. And if you've got 4 data sets which are giving you a similar trend, your error bars are shorter. At some times of the year, you're going to find, if you look around it, you're getting changes. As the season dries, you'll start seeing drying trends emerge on the regional map. And we've seen that in the southeast for many years. Sometimes it'll be dry in the west and wet in the east. Sometimes it's dry in the east and wet in the west. We've also had situations where we get a dry strip through the middle because the northwest rain bands come down and split, and the top gets the rain, the bottom gets the rain, and there's a strip of country which might be 50 kilometres wide through the middle, which doesn't get the rain. So going and looking at that regional map and seeing what the trend is in rainfall. If you think back to the Monero, there was green up the top, green up the middle, so it wasn't uniform. Don't look at one site, look at a number of sites. And what are you looking for? You compare the coloured forecast lines against the dated historical data. That's more important than looking at the values on the left-hand side of the graph. Is it 500, 1,000, 1,500? In fact, in my view, we could get rid of the numbers on the left and it wouldn't change the quality of info we get. We're looking for a trend. Are the odds saying the season's going to be hard, average, or above average? This is not a program to help you make decisions on, should I change stock from this paddock to this another paddock? It's looking over the horizon at those bigger issues that you need to think about. There are different programs you use for day-to-day decision making. This is filling in a hole we've never had before. And one of the big things that came out of last year, always remember, we don't need big springs to make money. Big springs cost us money. Our most profitable springs are between 40% and say 70%. Once we get above 70%, we get a whole lot of animal health problems. We get poor growth rates. Things happen. Below 40%, we've got higher costs because of lack of feed. We need, what we're looking for is, are we going to get a spring which is reasonable? And I look at the situation that occurred last year. Farming forecaster was saying for the northern end of the southwest slope. So I'm talking hard and young Cootamundra in this comment. In September 2003, farming forecaster was saying people in that area were going to get a spring. Wasn't going to be a big spring, but it was a spring. but all the noise on the radio was gloom and doom. What farming forecaster was saying, there was no need for producers to make unusual stocking decisions. The ones who looked at farming forecaster and backed their judgment and did it were happy. The ones who got caught up in the gloom and doom lost a lot of money because they sold stock on an absolutely flat market and lost big bucks. And Matt Litchke from the LLS up in Goulburn, Matt and I looked at a number of sites historically, and what farming forecaster was telling us in spring of 23 ended up being repeated. So the sites where it was saying spring in September, spring was going to be tough, it was tough. And in the sites where it said you were going to get a spring, we got a spring. Have a look at that one. How do you feel about that? The colours of the shading, there's the forecast line. So this was a forecast done on the 1st of May, again, some Tassie data. I'll step through it now. So the season didn't break until April. That's what it tells us, because the black line was still at 0. They must have got a bit of rain at the start of April and it started coming away and things got a bit better. Then the forecast was done. Look at the 50% line. It's tracking through, right? That's 10, that's 25, that's 50. So it's tracking well below the average year, and it's, in fact, ends up tracking, you might say, around the 20-25% level. So what's that really saying? This is the 50% line. There's a 50% chance you would have a season like an historical 25% year. The 90% line, this only occurs 1 out of 10. You had a 1 out of 10 chance of having an average year. So, but one important thing out of this is it is not saying you have a high likelihood of a major drought. If that 50% line was sitting down here in the white territory, you're in deep S. It's not. It's sitting up here. And it was interesting when I delivered this workshop, and this is Bothwell in Tasmania, in the Midlands, up about 500 metres. Number of producers came up to the end of the day and they said, Phil, the most important thing you said today was that it was not total gloom and doom. It's going to be tough, but it's not gloom and doom. And they said, we're on the place all the time and we think it's gloom and doom. This ended up saying it's better than that. And that was important for them. And what this forecast ended up showing is what ended up occurring. They had a tough winter, and they had to take unusual actions. They used drought lots. There was feeding. There was extra cost. It doesn't get around all the negatives of it, but it gave them some clarity and confidence. Were they on the right track, and did they need to do anything extra?
Phil, I'm just going to interrupt you there quickly. We are a couple of minutes away from 8 o'clock, which is when we will cut off the recording. However, if anyone would like to stay on and ask further questions, please feel free. And I am mindful, Phil, that we'll get back to Christine's question earlier about pasture types being different to monitoring sites.
Yep, rightio. I reckon I've got 5 minutes to finish. So this is a Holbrook site, I think, for this year. So when I look at this, so Christine's your one about pastures, because we're comparing the forecast against history. If your pastures aren't quite as productive as this one, your historical herbage masses will be lower. But you will have already accounted for that in your stocking rates. So the relative performance of a property, even though the pastures are different compared to this year against history, often stays the same. So that's why I talk about comparing forecast lines against history and not against necessarily the herbage mass on the other side. So, you might need to think about that. Okay, your pastures would have to be radically different for it for it to fall apart. And the chances are your pastures are still going to follow a similar trend line. And that's what we're looking at. So if I come back here to this one, now what the actual herbage mass here is going to be dependent on how much soil fertility I've got in this site, what's the stocking rate. There's a whole lot of other factors that will move this figure up and down. But what is this saying? This is saying in the middle of July this year at Holbrook, it was the same as a 25% year. So it was a 1 in 4 year in the middle of July. If I'd gone back further into May, it would have been lower than that. We got a little bit of improvement during July, and we've got improvement during the first half of August, and it's kicked a bit. By mid-August, your black line is now sitting at where the brown and the green. It's at the 50% level. So at the middle of July, you're at a 25% level historically. You're now at a 50% level historically. Averaged across your farm. You might be looking at present in some of your paddocks where you've got calving cattle or lambing ewes and they're a bit short. It's this average across the farm is very hard for producers. It's hard to do, I can tell you that now. So at present, you are tracking the blue line. Right? The black is tracking the blue line. So if we follow the blue line, where's that tracking? It's tracking along the average season. It's tracking along the 50% line. So right now, what this is saying is things have improved over the last month. And at present, given the soil moisture and historical rainfall, you might end up having an average year. If you're a little bit below average, it doesn't matter. So if you get down in the red where it does start matter. There'll be one more extension of the black line in August, about the 22nd. You'll see that black line. It says it continued on the blue, as it dropped down to the yellow. And then on the 1st of September, everything's redone again. So to me, there's 4 times you need to look at it. Start of the month to see what the forecast is. So about 8th or 9th when the black line's drawn, 16th when the black line's drawn again, 22nd when the black line's drawn again, and then you're back to the start of the month. Looking at it 10 times a month, I think's overkill. Looking at it every day is definitely overkill. Changes to come. There's 8 new sites with probes across the Murray LLS, and as I said, I'm trying to find out why they aren't already up there. They should have been. So as I said, they'll go from Tumbarumba out to the pastoral zone. This is the first time we've put probes in the pastoral zone and used grass grow out there, and the producers are very comfortable with what we've been able to produce for the pastoral zone out of grass grow. So the producers have got to give me a tick. Yes, the model is giving us meaningful information before we'll put that on the website. If they say to me, this is a load of crap, it doesn't go up. The Riverina is putting in 20 probes, so a lot of the Riverina sites will go from virtual to full sites. Victoria has agreed to join. They've already got a heap of probes in if we can get the money to help them do it. And that would have massive impact. You think if we were covering Victoria to the Queensland border and South Australia, what that means to a whole range of people. The Tasmanians are dependent on seeing Victoria because their markets are driven by what's happened in Victoria. Victorian producers have rung me and thanked me for what, not me, but farming forecasts and what they've done, because they believe there's a strong correlation between seasonal conditions in southern New South Wales and the Victorian cattle market. The bigger we can get this across, the more powerful it becomes for everyone. There's 6 probes to go in on the South Coast very soon, and there's some minor changes to be made to the website to make it a bit more intuitive of how you find your way around it. This is my last point. If you think there's value in this program, you need to talk to local members, both state and federal, about the value of this site. With additional funding, there's more improvements we can make. I've seen money invested in the last 2 years by drought hubs, which would have returned about 100th of what this program would have returned if the money was put into Farming Forecaster. It's not about we need brand new money. We just need to allocate the money that is sitting in agriculture a bit smarter and into a program. We make some modifications to grass grow to improve it. Therefore, every producer who looks at this program gets that benefit. We don't have to run an extension program. It's already built in. We've already done that once. We've now got a drought lot in farming forecaster. So if ground cover gets below a certain amount, the stock are moved into a drought lot. They come out when there's a certain herbage mass. That change was made. No producer really knew about it because the benefits were already built in. Right? We've got a powerful tool. There's more we can do with it. We just need to make people higher up realise how important this is. And the people who have the biggest influence on that are you people listening. And I can talk to bureaucrats and politicians all my life, but just it's water off a duck's back. I've been in this game for 45 years now, 46 years. This is the most powerful program I've seen in livestock industries in that time. That's it. Thank you, Steph.
Thanks, Phil. Sandy must like the sound of your voice because he asked the recording to be continued. So we are still recording. We've had a couple of questions come through. One from Jess. How is a pastoral zone defined in grass grow? Is it species, etc.?
Sorry, say that again, please. How is
a pastoral zone defined in grass grow? E.g., is it species, etc.?
No. The regions are based on LLS regions, and then we just work with. It's the LLS decide where they want to put the probes across that region, and they nominate the localities, and then we just go about to the best of our ability of building a robust, relevant farm system to run in that region. So, for instance, Central West have just contacted me. They've put 5 probes in the ground. So I think we're going from Dubbo south and further west than Central Tableland. So we're going to have another chunk of New South Wales appear on the map.
The next question, how much funding do you need to add a probe, in brackets, or the 20 Victorian probes?
Oh, look, if we could get our hands on $500,000, we would have Victoria on board. We would most likely pick up some of Southeast and South Australia on board. We'd be able to do some work on tropical species to enable us to push further into northern New South Wales and potentially southern Queensland. It would enable us to make some changes to outputs. There's data we can give people now that we weren't initially, which would have a big impact. We're not talking about megabucks. It's talking about smart investment just to add value. And if I was Federal Minister for Agriculture and we had Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales, South East and South Australia all covered, I could sit there and in 4 hours get an accurate impression of seasonal conditions over that very wide area which produces a lot of the lamb and grass-fed beef in Australia without having to rely on anyone else to give me information. If I was a state minister, I could sit there and do it for my own. If I owned an abattoir, I could sit and look at where are conditions across Australia. There's just so many benefits that we could, by just getting that extra geographical spread, that not only the producers benefit, industry benefits, government benefits, very smart use of money.
Christine has added a comment. Hopefully the changes in Telstra going from 3G to 4G doesn't impact farming forecasters' ability to upload data. Do you have any comments on that, Phil?
Yeah, it's already cost us about $15,000 for some of the early probes that went in the ground with 3G. So we've had to go and change motherboards at $1,000 a pop. That's all been done. and hopefully the probes we're putting in now are more robust to handle changes in the future. It'll be interesting when you see the new probes come up that they'll have sensors at every 10 centimetres. So we're buying probes with more sensors at half the price than what we were 8 years ago. And their communication box is a lot better.
Lucinda have the developers talked with Salrac?
We've talked to a lot of people. We get sometimes we get good responses, sometimes we get looked at blankly. I think Lucinda's been in the game long enough to know that there's a lot of other factors that will influence how money's funded or not funded.
Sandy has asked, how accurate is plant available water reading on a virtual site? As we understand, there is a virtual site near Tumba. Can we really rely on that? And a site at Glenroy near Tumba. Sorry.
Yep. You can rely on its historical positioning, Sandy. You know, where does that red dot sit against history? That is very solid. There is always going to be a bit of noise around the figure. So I'm just pulling a figure out of the air. Let's say it said 45 millimetres. Right, there's going to be error bars around that 45 millimetres. It could be 40, it could be 50. The relativity between other years is very strong, right? Because the soil type hasn't changed, pasture type hasn't changed. All those are constant across the 30 years. So if there's a difference, it's because of rainfall and the rainfall pattern that's driven whether this year's figure is low or high. So there will always be a bit of buffer around the actual number. The relativity against history is very strong.
Jess has asked, how can Farming Forecaster benefit mixed farmers or broadacre farmers? What lens or interpretation can they put on the data that comes out of Farming Forecaster?
Rightio. Well, mixed farms still run livestock. So it's when we set up a system on a mixed farm, all we are modelling is the grass component of the mixed farm. We're forgetting the cropping. But we will make allowances in setting the system up. So if the stock go off the pasture and they're on the stubble for 3 months, we do that. So on one of the western here, to set it up, the stock went off pasture in November. They were on stubble to the end of March. They came off the stubble. They went on to salt bush for 2 months and then they went back onto pasture. What we modelled for that site is the pasture, which was going to be grazed from May to November. And then by some things that I won't bother going into, it reflected that they weren't on the pasture the rest of the time. So people still have to run livestock and they want to get production off it. Some of the producers in Tassie who run mixed farms have actually found some of the probe data and the trends useful for how they think the trend might be occurring in crop. If the trend line in a pasture is going down against history, it is highly likely that the trend line for your crop against history is also going down. Right? It's quite logical. The reason it's going down, there's no moisture in the soil. These plants might have different rooting depths, but the trend against history is similar. So a few of the people who have had these on their place for a while, they now also are taking some of the information in thinking about what's happening on the cropping side. It would be far better if they had probes in their crop, but there is value even on the cropping side. And again, people over time pick that up with using it. I can't emphasize that too strongly. If someone's looked at this program for 2 years, they're going to make totally different decisions than if someone's looked at it for 10 minutes.
Angela's put a comment in, I may be able to advocate for the Victorian probes. What would be the funding requirement for Victoria, but happy to follow that up after the session.
We've spoken to Victoria and we've had a very positive response, Angela, right? There's no problems there. The Vics are happy to do it. It's just finding the money to do it. We might chat after about that. Okay. Thank you. Any lobbying from anyone is greatly appreciated.
I think we're about 15 minutes over time, so we'll do a last call for any final questions if you want to put them in the box, or feel free to unmute yourself and have a yarn to Phil. If there
Can I just ask Sandy a question? Are we doing something next week, Sandy?
Yeah, Phil, definitely.
Yeah, good.
Be awesome. It'd be really good, actually, following on from this. And yeah, I've got a few guys lined up to come across. So it should be
right out. Yeah, that's good. Right out. I'll have stuff prepared for you.
awesome. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, as I said, any final questions, ask now. But as I did say at the beginning, this recording will be available, and any further questions we can, like if you think of more questions tomorrow, whenever, just send them through. We'll get them to Phil and can get some more of his insight. But yeah, other than that, thank you all for attending. I really hope you got a heap out of it. It's always enjoyable listening to Phil and his insights.
Can I just make a comment, Steph? It would be of great value in potentially mid-October to do this again. We wouldn't worry about the bit at the front about how you look at Farming Forecaster. We'd just look at where things are at now and what you might decide. So what I'm tending to do in Tassie now is we do 4 webinars a year. I might go for half an hour, 45 minutes. It just keeps putting cream on the cake. Helps people get used to it, understand it, and it's just cementing it and helping people with decision making. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, definitely. The aim of these webinars is to keep bringing what all of you guys want. So definitely, if that's something that everyone is wanting, it's very easy for us to organise.
Sounds great, Phil. As long as the cream doesn't turn to custard.
Look, I'm not worried. I'm not worried. I know you've come through a tough time, and this is one of the problems you have on your farm. You spend a lot of time on your farm, and when you've been through a difficult autumn, that is clouding your thinking, and you carry that clouded thinking into the future. Whereas this allows you to some degree to it takes the emotion out of it. So yeah, you've been in a tough time. I'm not saying you're going to have a brilliant year, but I think your spring's going to be okay. That's my reading as of present. And shoot me down if I'm wrong.
No, all good. We might wrap it up there.